Welcome everyone. Saturday, June 27th here in Canada. It's apparently after midnight in India. And different times in different time zones. So we gather here from around the world. Some of us are here now. Some of us are also here now, but it's a different now. It's a later now after this was already recorded. Here to find now. So this is a Q&A session, but it's also meant to be a meditation session. So we close our eyes, focus our attention on our experience, and try to cultivate a capacity to observe and appreciate and understand reality, understand our experiences. See them clearly, become more familiar with them, more familiar with our habits, good and bad, more familiar with our emotions, more familiar with the things that we cling to as good or bad. If you have a question about meditation, first thing you should ask yourself is whether you've read our booklet on how to meditate. Not to push it on you, but if you haven't, you might not understand the answers, and you might be asking questions that could easily be answered or maybe even be out of context if you'd read the booklet. As we talk about meditation, we are talking about a specific tradition in meditation, Buddhist meditation. If you have questions that aren't about meditation, well, you can ask them anyway, but the chances of me answering them, or Shraddha, who is my assistant here today, and asking them gets lower the further they go from the meditation practice. Once you've asked your question, or if you don't have any questions, just close your eyes and meditate with us.
Bhante, the first question is...
Oh,
it's not the first one. Oh, are you ready to answer questions?
I'm ready. Are you ready to ask them?
Yes. The first one wasn't the first question, but it's related, probably the first one that needs an answer. What do I note and pay attention to during this meditation session?
Well, like anything else, like any other moment in time, you would note all of those things that you would note otherwise. The obvious difference is the sound. You don't have to be seeing anything, because you can have and should, for best results, have your eyes closed. But hearing the sound of my voice, you can say hearing. But apart from that, there's so much else going on that really it should be quite obvious. There's lots of things you could be noting. Of course, that's a part of the practice. as you practice, you start to recognize and become aware of more things that you didn't realize, you didn't pay attention to before. So you're more alert and aware of the shifting of emotions, the shifting of physical sensations, the shifting of feelings, the shifting of thoughts, all of which you can note. If there's nothing else, just go back to the stomach and focus on the stomach rising and falling. It goes without saying, if this question was asked by someone who hadn't read the booklet, well, read the booklet, it might help.
While noting rising and falling, can we ignore other objects if they are not distractions?
You can, but it's not wise. You shouldn't. Because to say they're not distractions is misleading. They've already distracted you. They've already taken your attention. Once, if they have arisen, it means you've experienced them. And if you've experienced them, you should note them. There's nothing special about the rising and falling. It is kind of special, but you shouldn't look at it as special in terms of preferring it. Like, oh, I've got to stop noting all these other things because I'm no longer noting the rising and falling at all. A good rule of thumb is to note anything, and once it is gone, don't go looking for something else or move on to the next thing. Go back. Try to, unless there's something really pressing, try to go back to the rising and falling until the next thing comes.
When we meditate, where our tongue position should be?
There's no special position that the tongue should be in. In fact, if you put it in a special position, you should probably stop. Where is your tongue when you don't think about where your tongue is? That's where your tongue should be.
I really struggle with my mind. It's loud and arrogant. It never shuts up. I guess the question is, any help?
Well, the person who asks this, it's actually encouraging, because it means they're seeing that about themselves. For someone to actually say that is generally a sign that they are gaining an insight and gaining in a appreciation of the way the mind works, appreciation of the stress caused by the mind. Of course, there's a sense of aversion here that I can't say it's there, but probably this person has a sort of aversion to this state, and that's something you should be mindful of as well. And you dislike the state, say disliking.
I'm unable to sit cross-legged on the floor due to hip problems. What is the best posture for lengthy meditation session?
So, an interesting thing is I seem to get this question from time to time, or this claim from time to time, and I don't mean to be don't mean to attack you or anything, but I do want to gently suggest that it might not be true that you're unable to sit cross-legged. So I don't know what your hip problems are, and sometimes truly they do stop people from sitting on the floor, but I have had people who claim these sorts of problems for good reason. I'm not saying they're lying or that they're deluded or anything, but you might be surprised that you can sometimes, at least for a short time, sit on the floor, and that through practice, some good things happen to your body. Now, that's not, true for everyone. If someone has had a hip replacement, for example, I can imagine it being really problematic for some people to sit cross-legged on the floor. So I just want to point that out, that in some cases, Again, I can't give advice because I don't know your situation and I'm not a doctor and so on. But in some cases, it's not as true as we think, and you surprise yourself when you try, when you focus on the pain. Like sometimes this statement means it's just so much pain and it's just too much and I'm going to injure myself. And then when you do it and learn how to be mindful of the pain, it surprises you that, oh, the pain isn't so bad, and actually the pain starts to go away, and actually my body improves as a result of me no longer being afraid of the pain and so on. So just point that out. I don't know your situation, and I'm not trying to contest that. If you can't, like really can't sit on the floor, and I point that out because sitting on the floor can be quite beneficial. It's a good sort of moderate position. But if you really can't, then absolutely sitting in a chair is fine. Even lying down is fine for people who can't even sit up. Don't worry too much about lengthy meditation sessions. I'm not sure if you can walk, but if you can walk, try and do some walking and some sitting, and try and do several sessions throughout the day. So if you're only able to sit for a short time, then we'll do some short sits as well. You might find that the time improves depending on your situation.
And there's another question about sitting. What is the difference in meditation quality when sitting on a zafu, on a zambuton, and sitting on the edge of a chair with 90 degrees angle between cuff and thigh? The potential for clarity feels the same.
I would try sitting cross-legged. Sitting, zaifu, is that, that's cross-legged, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm confusing. I think they're talking about sitting cross-legged. I would, try not to use any of them if possible. Try and sit on a mat. Maybe a little bit of, if you need to, you can raise your butt a little bit. Ultimately, yeah, the body posture is irrelevant. It's just that we have a lot of sankhara, a lot of habits or associations between our posture and our state of mind. So when we're standing up and walking, we're more alert. When we're sitting and lying down, we're more focused. But that's not really, it doesn't really have to be that way, especially in regards to the mind. You can do lying meditation and be quite clear if you're very mindful. So all the questions about sitting, I wouldn't worry too much. If you can't sit cross-legged, it's not a huge deal. But generally and practically, for a lot of people, it will make a difference.
And watching rising and falling, do you focus on a single point or the whole abdomen?
You don't really choose. Sometimes it might be more pointed, sometimes it might be more general. But if you're choosing, you're doing a little too much forcing and controlling. And that doesn't just go with the rising and falling, it goes with any object. You put your mind there, and when you notice that it's rising, and that might be just a point, it might be the whole abdomen, you say to yourself, rising. That's it. Because you're allowing for impermanence, for uncertainty. It's an important part of the practice. Because that creates flexibility, it wears away our attachment to expectations and clinging to stability and so on.
Sometimes I don't know how to name my feelings or sensations. How should I name what I'm experiencing when I can't put a word on it?
Feeling. Let's just say feeling. There's another one we use that's not quite immediately obvious what it means, is knowing. Knowing is just it's a bit awkward, but it's the best word I think in English for an awareness. So sometimes you're like, oh, and you notice something. That noticing can be the object of awareness, and so you'd say to yourself, knowing, knowing. So knowing and feeling are two fairly good catch-alls for those sorts of things that don't have any particular word associated with them, but you do want to have some word to remind yourself, hey, it's just that.
What is the difference between noting and being aware?
There's a big difference. Noting is an active act that you perform. Awareness is a quality of the mind that's there in everything. We're always aware. You could say maybe when we're asleep we're not aware. But awareness, even when we're dreaming, there's awareness. Noting is an activity. It's maybe what we would call meditation. When you note, in other words, when you repeat a mantra to yourself, you're practicing meditation. And it's what conditions your awareness. Any kind of meditation mantra will condition your awareness depending on the type of mantra, and more especially depending on the object of the mantra. So our objects are reality, and so when we note pain, it conditions our awareness of the pain so that there's no liking or disliking and so on. No identification.
Is it better to have small sessions, 10 to 30 minutes, with more glimpses of proper meditative concentration, absorption, than a longer session, 1 hour, with less glimpses?
So I'm not sure we're on the same page as far as what meditation is and what the goals of meditation are, but proper meditative concentration is not a thing that we're looking for or talking about. Proper meditative concentration is a moment. So maybe that's what you're saying, but it doesn't sound like it. Proper meditative concentration, proper absorption is the absorption in a moment. And that, of course, doesn't depend at all on how long your session is. So I would say practically, and this is important advice, I think, a happy medium where you're not doing sessions that are too short and doing lots of them, but on the other hand, you're not doing too few sessions that are longer. Just because they're longer doesn't mean it's better. The point being, if you do one long session every day, then there's 23 hours or so where you're not mindful, where you're not meditating, and you're relying on ordinary mindfulness throughout the day. Whereas on the other hand, if you do several 30-minute meditations, or let's say for a serious meditator, several 1-hour sessions versus one 2-hour session, let's say. Better to do some happy medium, not doing half-hour sessions, but not doing 2-hour sessions. Maybe if that's your medium, find 1-hour sessions, but do several of them during the day, 2 of them, let's say. 2 1-hour sessions, I'd say for a lot of people, is really good. Of course, some people do more, and some people can't do that much, but that's a pretty good, I think for a lot of people that would be a good happy medium. But then it's not, just to reiterate, it's not about how long the session is or how deep you go. It's about how many moments of mindfulness you have. Because it's those moments that are going to come together and create true meditative concentration. It has nothing to do with that one session. It has everything to do with your whole day, with your normal. What is normal for you? What is your habit? And that's all day. That's 24 hours. In 24 hours, how many moments do you have? That's a much better gauge of your true state of meditation.
Is it possible to practice while receiving concepts, like listening to a Dhamma talk or studying? What should be the object of attention?
Well, for example, listening to the Dhamma talk, you're going to receive the concepts anyway. You don't have to pay attention to receive some of the teaching. So it's actually not problematic to just focus on the sound and say hearing, hearing. You can still gain some of the lessons. It'll be intermittent. But if you put your focus on being mindful, then you'll find, more importantly, your state of mind is clear. And you're much better able to receive the teachings when they do filter through. You just say hearing, hearing. And note everything else, of course, pain. And sometimes when you're sitting listening to a Dhamma talk, it's quite painful because you have to sit on the floor, or you have to sit still and be quiet, and you can't. It's boring sometimes, or the mind starts to complain, even though you're enjoying it. Your mind kind of starts to complain because it's used to being pleased.
Should your shoulders, arms, and hands fall into place, or should they be strategically placed for optimal meditation?
I don't think it's a question of leading to optimum meditation, but following the tradition, we sit cross-legged. You can sit in full or half lotus, but we tend to recommend people to sit with one leg in front of the other without the heel underneath the leg, just the front heel touching the back shin. And one hand on top of the other, and not worry about your shoulders or arms. But with your hands placed flat on your lap, palms up, one on top of the other. It's good to follow tradition, and I think it's more about that than it is about actually promoting optimal meditation. When you do things the way other people do them, you're less likely to get caught up in your own ego, in your own partiality, your own bias. Westerners often have a hard time falling into Buddhist cultures, and often it's just because of ego. We let our ego take charge, and we hide it behind a observation of the silliness of culture, because culture is pretty useless. There's not a lot of good in it. It can be very useful for holding together religion, but culture is not intrinsically important, and that's a problem itself. But following after culture just because it's the culture can be quite useful. Helps you give up your ego.
And then going back to some questions that skipped earlier, and meditation help with a lack of sleep?
Yes, for sure. Well, first of all, seeing it as a lack of sleep is problematic. It's a big part of the problem of insomnia. A big part, maybe the biggest part of insomnia, of the problem of insomnia, is seeing it as a problem, right? As with everything, really. Like I've talked about this before. It's not, the problem isn't the problems. The problem is that you think they're problems, and that nowhere is that clearer than with insomnia. Now, lack of sleep is problematic. Some if your mind is active and stressed, you need some sleep. But seeing it as a problem makes it so much worse. Probably is worse than the actual lack of sleep, because that's where the real stress and anxiety and just overall terror of not being able to get to sleep comes from. Depression and so on. So mindfulness helps you change that and helps you be okay with whatever, including a lack of sleep. So if you're mindfully awake all night, you aren't stressed about that fact. As a result, you can wake up at least somewhat refreshed. You may be tired, you may be drowsy, but you're not stressed. And that lack of stress gives you so much more energy. Actually, really makes you healthier as well. So see that as an issue as well, as a part of the issue. Now, through prolonged meditation practice, especially since you're no longer seeing it as a problem, you're much more likely to get a good night's sleep, because of course the stress is a huge part of what keeps you awake. The fear of not getting to sleep is a huge part of what keeps you from sleeping.
Is it normal to feel a certain headache, like an electric tingling sensation in the temples while meditating? It arises especially just when I feel more mindful and kind of distracts me.
We're not in the business of telling people what is normal and not normal. Again, this question comes a lot, and I think that's the response, is we're just not in the business of pointing out what is normal and what is not normal. There's no benefit to it. So let's look more at the experience and how you react to it. There is a certain headache. Well, that's Vedana. You would say pain, pain. If there's a tingling sensation, well, that's feeling. You would say feeling, feeling. Or even tingling would be fine. It arising, especially when you feel more mindful, is probably associated with clinging to a certain state. You feeling more mindful is probably an illusion. It's probably just a pleasant sensation, calm or peace or so on. And you should note that. You should also note any liking of it. Distracting you is probably being worried about it or averse to it. So you should note that as well. Disliking or frustrated, or it can be worried, afraid of it maybe. Well, that's it. No, note it when it arises. Also note your reactions to it and your reactions to the things that you'd rather be experiencing.
But this one I'm putting up just because I think they may not have read the booklet. So I just have the booklet here. Questions.
Yeah, none of that is what we do, so there are answers to it. I'm just not the one to give them. If you're interested in our meditation tradition, Shraddha has kindly put up the link to our booklet. You can download it for free. You can order it for free even. We'll send it to you, apparently. We used to. I'm not sure if we still do, but I think we do. Send it to you for free. You can't get a better deal than that. All postage paid, I think. Sounds like a cult, sort of, like a religious cult. Like, why these guys are obsessed with their teaching. That's why they're sending it to us. Not really. We're obsessed with goodness. We believe this is good. We're not trying to make you Buddhists. We're not trying to spread the good word or something like that. We're not proselytizing. We're doing good. We believe people should do good. We believe meditation is good. You don't have to be Buddhist. You don't have to become my student. But here's something that we think is good. It's not actually my teachings. I've just put it in words that in many ways are just a translation from the language and the words that it was given to me in. And rather than have to repeat them to everyone I meet, I just put it in a booklet and read the booklet. And if you're still interested after that, then come and talk. It saves me some effort, and that way I can reach more people and get right to what's important, and answering questions which are of course individual and require a more personal touch.
I have too many questions that arise from meditation. Do I continue to meditate or seek answers? Because answers seem to open new doors to other things. Or should I become a monk?
That is some questions. If you have lots of questions that arise from meditation, it may be that the answer is a little bit of refinement of meditation, because honestly, over time your meditation will decrease the number of questions you have. Should decrease the number of questions you have. It may not answer them all, but because a lot of them are ultimately irrelevant questions, you will discard them. I mean, many of them will be answered, but you'll abandon many of them as well as not being not as important as you thought they were. So yeah, I would start to try and be mindful of doubting and worrying and thinking, analyzing, all of that. I mean, certainly there are many questions. It's the reason for this program. Many questions that should get an answer. But if you're personally getting more and more questions, it might be a sign of a need to pay some attention to that.
How do I gauge my progress in my meditation practice?
Well, to some extent, don't, because it's not a good way to, you're not practicing when you do that. So just be careful not to become obsessed with progress, which is, I think, often the case. It's often a problem where gauging our progress becomes more important than actually gaining progress or progressing. I think the best answer is the simple answer. You have less greed, less anger, and less delusion, which is hard to gauge, really. First of all, it's hard for a person to gauge their own progress, but second of all, it's hard to gauge because it's not consistent. It's not like we always have every moment have the same level of greed, anger, and delusion. They can't even arise at the same, greed and anger can't arise at the same time. And not only that, but sometimes we're not greedy or angry. Does that mean we have none? Of course not. So it's hard to gauge. And so the best is to just do the work. Do the work, be conscientious or thoughtful about how you're practicing and the quality of your practice. Reflect on that more than the results that you've gained from the practice. Reflect on the quality. And that's, of course, something that you won't even know in the beginning. But as you practice, you'll have a better sense of what is quality moments, what moments of quality meditation are. And you'll have a very good sense, the further you go, of how far you are from that, and when you're far from that, and when you're close to that. And once you become more proficient at a quality meditation, you won't have to worry about progress, because you'll have seen how it works, how the progress works, and more importantly, because you know the quality of it, you know the quality of the moment. And you know through observation that a quality moment can only lead to quality results. The question people often ask in response to that is, well, what does it mean to have a quality moment? I think Shraddha asked this. I can't really tell you that, Mindful, I mean, obviously there are descriptions, but they don't really adequately describe it. You really have to experience it. And I think we do fairly quickly. I don't think it's a mystery. It's just, you'll have to see for yourself what is a moment and you'll have to start to know for yourself, oh yeah, this is a really quality moment. Of course you won't think that, but you'll be too busy having a quality moment.
Can you speak to the importance of practicing renunciation as it pertains to practicing meditation?
Renunciation, this is a fairly unique question. I don't know if I've ever gotten this one. Renunciation is at least on two levels. There's a sort of a worldly sense, and then there's the spiritual sense. So worldly sense of renunciation is renouncing possessions, renouncing social status, renouncing livelihood, renouncing relationships and engagements and entanglements and so on. Renouncing society, renouncing a lot of worldly things. And that's important. It's not something you need to do to an extreme degree to start with. Just because you become a monk doesn't mean your meditation will be easy. It's not really the proper order necessarily. It's not really the proper order generally. But to some extent, you'll have to renounce certain things. You'll have to renounce evil, killing, stealing, lying, cheating, all that. Your best to renounce a lot of obsession and ambition in the world. Because of course that's going to interfere with your practice. But another aspect of that is you naturally renounce a lot of things. You start to become less interested in the worldly things that you used to get interested in. So it's not even so much that you have to renounce them first, it's that it's just a part of the progress. Over time you'll renounce more and more. The other kind of renunciation is actually the meditation itself, because of course as you meditate you start to renounce old habits, bad habits. You start to renounce unwholesome mind states. You start to renounce those things, those experiences that you used to cling to. Experiences of pleasure, experiences of calm, experiences of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking. You start to renounce them as well. So, good question. That's, I think, an important one. Important, I mean, it's not just me. The Buddha was often talking about, the person who asked this is probably knowledgeable about Buddhism, because this is something the Buddha talked about quite a lot. Nekkhamma, it's one of the 10 perfections. It's a huge part of the practice.
I feel confused about trying to let go of our desires. What if we no longer have any desires? What do we do with our lives? How do we move forward? Do you have desires? Helping others, maybe?
Well, not confused. That's what I would start with, because confusion prevents you from seeing clearly about things. I'm not trying to be smart or anything. I mean, but it is important. It is true that it's hard to. Part of the reason why you're confused is the confusion. Confusion prevents you from seeing clearly. So try and note confused, doubting, and so on, worried perhaps even. And rather than thinking about when you no longer have desires, just try and learn about your desires, the objects of your desire, your aversion, the objects of your aversion, and let go of that idea of the theoretical, what would I do when, and look at what you're doing now and what it's doing to you. Because you'll start to see that desires are cause for stress and suffering and don't actually help you. And then it doesn't matter what happens when you're without them, because you're like, well, what, do I think it's better to have these things that cause me stress and suffering? Absolutely not. And you won't have to worry about such things. If, on the other hand, you worry about it, and you'll never get anywhere. You'll never find the truth of it. Worry, doubt, confusion, they don't help you find the truth about a question or a problem.
Is Vissudimaga the best book on meditation for someone who wants to have a deep understanding of its application?
Maybe. That might be a good way of describing it. I'm hesitant to suggest anyone read a book for besides my book. No, I mean, my book is a booklet. It's meant to give you instruction on how to practice. The vissudimaga has a lot in it. It's much better used as a reference. It's probably best used as a reference for an advanced meditator, for a teacher in meditation, for a monk, because a lot of it's particular to monastics, that sort of thing. So I'm hesitant to suggest that, you want a deep understanding of the application of meditation, read a book? Clearly no, right? Guess what you should do if you want a deep understanding of the application of meditation? Take a guess.
This question I'm not sure about, but I'll ask. How to make noting non-verbal and focus more on the object?
You don't have to make noting non-verbal. It's meant to be a thought. I mean, non-verbal, don't speak it out loud. That's one way. Don't do that. But if there's a thought in the mind, like seeing, that's fine. That's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be an action, a reminder to you. That thought is going to straighten the mind out. So no, this isn't me, this isn't mine, this isn't good, this isn't bad. It's just seeing, it's just pain, it's just thinking. You don't have to focus more on the object. That's a bit misleading. I may be misleading saying that as well, but the point is not to focus more on an object. The point is to see the object just as it is, without going any deeper than that, or being more shallow than that. Just is what it is. Just what it is. When you experience something, that experience has already happened. How are you going to respond to that? That's our concern. So when you see something, you don't have to see it deeper or anything, or see it more. You just have to remind yourself that that's seeing. That's the practice. That straightens the mind out in regards to it.
I'm retired and wish to follow a monastic lifestyle. Are there benefits to this method of living?
There are, of course. It's not to say that if you did it, all your problems would be solved, of course. I don't suppose you think that or anyone thinks that, but I'm just more to say that it may not be the proper course. For some people it may not work. For some people it may actually be harmful to their practice. It's not that good of a thing. It's a great thing. It's a very powerful thing. It's just that that's conceptually. In reality and practically, I can't say what's going to happen. Especially, we're talking 2,600 years later. Do you really know what it's going to be like living in this monastery or that monastery? So far removed from the Buddha. So much, much better to focus on the meditation practice and become ordained as a sort of a part of the course, a natural outcome of the practice. Like you're wandering along and you just get in a car. Not wandering along, you're traveling along. You're going down the road and someone picks you up as a hitchhiker and you just get in the car. Just keep going. And you feel lucky that you got a ride.
When I'm out with other people, that is when not meditating, my mind makes me feel inferior compared to them. And then I tend to people please. How should I deal with this?
Well, just note those feelings. You feel inferior, that's a feeling. I get it though, it's noticing it is an important thing. And it's hard. I mean, that's not something it's easy to be mindful of because it's based on delusion. And delusion is the opposite of being mindful. So it's very hard to be mindful. You can't really directly be mindful of it because it's an unmindful state. But you can note all those feelings once you're aware of them. Feeling of self-hatred, worry. There's a lot of worry probably, fear, desire to please, craving for appreciation, craving for acceptance, and so on. Focus on all that. Oh, you'll become so powerful if you can focus on that. You become a god among men, so to speak. Not exactly, but it's just so powerful, and you feel like totally invincible when you give all that up. We should really start to look at things in terms of, I almost want to say, our benefit. It kind of is, the Buddha talked like that. He said, when you know that something's to your benefit, do that. Because you don't benefit yourself at the detriment to other people. It just doesn't happen that way. So there's no harm in it. There's no selfishness in it. There's a greatness in it. But when you look at that and you stop worrying about what makes other people happy, and when you stop thinking in terms of how you look, and stop trying to find acceptance in others and appreciation from others, so powerful. You're invincible. It doesn't matter whether you're inferior. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter whether you're inferior or superior. It doesn't actually help you. It doesn't actually do anything good. It doesn't really help to try and please people. It doesn't help them. Nope. See that more clearly, and there's power there.
Should I keep body tense during both sitting and walking meditation in order to keep posture straight, or should I relax?
Shouldn't do either. It's misleading. It's misleading. It's misleading. I want to impress that upon you, because when we're tense, we think we're doing that. Our relaxation, we think it's us relaxing, and it's not actually true. Sometimes you'll be relaxed, sometimes you'll be tense. That will happen to you, which isn't quite accurate as well. It's just happening. But it's more accurate to say it will happen to you. Most accurate, let's just say it happens. So when there's tension, say tense, tense. When you're relaxed as well, say relaxed, relaxed. Don't try and don't prefer. Catch yourself if you do prefer one or the other, and note that as well. Liking and disliking. Sorry, that might be an unsatisfying answer, but you have to figure that out.
Is remembering a good noting term to use when memories come up during meditation, as opposed to only using thinking?
It's not a big deal. Yes, you can use remembering. That's a good way of pinpointing it, but it can also be a little bit misleading, because there's no difference between remembering and thinking. Remembering isn't in the past. Remembering is still thinking in the present moment, right? That's the experience. So I'm not saying it's not a good idea. It just doesn't seem to be that important. Doesn't seem like you get that much benefit from saying remembering.
When mindfulness gets so strong that I can note several objects per second, should I do so, or should I note only one per second?
1 per second is a good sort of guide. It's not about noting everything, it's about being present. And the noting helps straighten out the mind so you can be present and objective. But it doesn't really work if you're just madly trying to note everything.
and becoming more angry and cold-hearted with the practice of Vipassana. Is this a common or expected result from the practice?
Doesn't matter. Sorry, it's hard. Answering that question doesn't really do any good. That's why I don't answer that way, I think. Is it common or expected? Let's focus more on the experience. Well, you could ask, why does it happen? This would be a better way of phrasing it. Why does this happen? How could this happen? Aren't I supposed to become more pliant and maybe, well, at least not cold-hearted? So why does it happen? So meditation takes you away from your objects of desire quite often. And that can make you a very sort of bitter person in the beginning. Meaning it evokes those states in you because you're not getting what you want. And so you can be quite hurt, you can be hurting a lot as a result of the practice. That's to be expected because of what it does to take you away from the objects of your desire. But that's only a product of desiring things. It's like a drug addict who has an addiction. Suppose there was a drug addict who had an addiction and they went on a program of detoxification, what is it? Detox anyway. Would anyone say to them, "Oh, you're hurting yourself, go back on the drugs"? Of course not. Yes, you're hurting yourself quite often in meditation. Not as a result of the meditation, but as a result of the drugs, the craving. Craving is just drugs. It's mind candy, and there's the chemicals, dopamine and what's it? I want to say oxytocin. I hope I've got that right. Anyway, the mind chemicals that we crave, that give us pleasant feelings. And a withdrawal from those is a bitter experience. That's not a long-term result. That's just withdrawal. And it's easily countered in meditation by focusing on those things as the object of experience. When you're angry, focus on the anger. Angry. Imagine a drug addict going through withdrawal. Do you think they wouldn't be angry, even cold-hearted? Oh, they could be very bitter, very stressed, very unpleasant to be around. That's why they go to these detox centers where people are trained to deal with angry, bitter, cold-hearted people. Because we empathize, we sympathize, and we appreciate, we respect the work that they're doing. I respect very much the work you're doing, and so if you get angry at me as your student, as your teacher, you get angry at me, I'm okay with that. I won't hold it against you. You're going to be angry. It won't last. You start to note angry. Oh, there's such a power. You really do a detox. You free yourself from all that entanglement and addiction.
Bhante, there was someone else who was having similar experiences. And I think I just moved this question up because you already answered, like your answer would help. So they're saying, I think I'm not doing well with this method. I'm stressed and angry at work. I note it, but I still get overwhelmed. Any advice?
So I might just add there to say to yourself, overwhelmed when that happens. But of course, note stressed, angry. Again, I think the withdrawal comparison holds. It's most likely imagine going through withdrawal when you also have to go to work. Most likely, I can't tell what your situation is, what your work is, how strong the stress and anger is, but mostly I would bear with it. It's okay. Even if it makes you work not at 100% in the beginning, maybe it gets you in a bit of trouble at work. If it's not overwhelming, you say you're overwhelmed, but what I mean is, if it's not to the point where you're going to get fired, I would persist, and it will get better. It absolutely will. In fact, it already is. You're already coming to terms with what it means to be addicted to things. That's getting stressed and angry. That's a great thing to learn. Meditation doesn't make you stressed or angry. I mean, doing it wrong can, so you do have to be conscientious of whether you are actually following the teachings. Read the booklet again maybe, make sure you're doing it properly. But don't expect the anger and stress to just go away. That's part of the withdrawal. The mind is like a baby cow. This is how the texts describe it. You want to train a baby cow, a baby ox. So in Asia they have oxen, and they train them to pull the plows. And now I don't particularly agree with the enslavement of animals or the enslavement of anything, but the mind is a little bit different. And so if we're talking about the mind, it's not unethical. So if you want to train the cow, the ox, baby one, you can't just get it to pull the plow. You first have to train it, and if you leave it with its mother, you also can't train it, because it's going to always be going back to the mother. And they say the mind is the same. If you want to train the mind, you have to take it away from the mother, which is the sense desires. Tie it to a post, which is the meditation practice, and let it run free. This is the clever thing about a post, and not tie it up to the post, but tie it on a rope to the post. And then you let it go, because there's a rope around its neck, or in its nose, or whatever. And so the simile is, it's a fairly cruel thing to do, I think, for an animal, but for the mind it can also be quite cruel. But it's not unethical, it's actually quite useful. Because the mind in the beginning will scream out, like a baby cow crying for its mother's milk. The difference, of course, is that addictions are not mother's milk. They're more like heroin. It's like tying up a meth addict or a heroin addict, and they're crying out for their heroin. It's more like that. But eventually, the baby cow or the heroin addict who's tied up will calm down, and the mind is the same. After some time, the training of the mind will begin.
Is it acceptable to note other objects beside the movement of the feet during walking meditation without stopping?
No, it's not. It's not encouraged. You're encouraged to stop walking before you note anything.
When we note rising, falling, we focus on the abdomen. But when we note anger, anxiety, should we focus on the place where we are feeling the anger, anxiety? Example, chest, head, etc.
So that's not quite accurate. You don't actually feel the anger or the anxiety in any spot of the body. But those spots that you're feeling are results of anger and anxiety, and you should be able to separate them. If you feel a heat or a tension or a energy in some part of the body, you should note it as such, feeling or tense or hot or so on. Noting anger is actually just a mental thing. It doesn't have a position, doesn't have a location. Mind doesn't take up space. So be able to separate those. When you're anxious, that's anxiety, but when you feel tense in the body, it's very important for an anxious person to be able to separate the two. It's very useful in helping to deconstruct anxiety and panic and so on.
I break the fourth precept, harsh speech, very often. What can I do to refrain from the temptation of verbally fighting someone?
So two things. Harsh speech isn't breaking the fourth precept. It is wrong speech, but it's only something that an anagami can be free from. So don't be don't beat yourself too harshly up about that. Lying is breaking the fourth precept. But more importantly, yes, practice meditation. Read our booklet if you haven't. You can take an at-home meditation course. As we wrap up here today, I'd recommend if anyone's interested. I know we're getting filled up. A lot of the slots are already full. It's great to see so many people. I think it was 45. Now, not everyone is. Sometimes people sign up and then I have to click delete it because they don't show up. But it's 45 people signed up per week is a lot of people. But there are still some free slots. If you want to sign up for an at-home meditation course, totally. I encourage you to do that. It's a great way to learn about this tradition of meditation. That's maybe tooting my own horn maybe a little bit. I just mean the format. You can decide for yourself whether I'm a useful person to come to for guidance. That's not important, but I just mean to say the format's quite useful and it seems to be beneficial to people. And it facilitates giving a greater depth of advice and instruction. So as a format, I definitely recommend considering to try the at-home meditation course. Oh, and I didn't talk about it, did I? I forgot. Well, let's stop then. That's it for today. Because I have something to say that I was supposed to say. Forgot. I think we're opening up the center again. So 2 things. First of all, we're opening up the center. Now, that might seem like a reckless thing to do to some, and you might be ready to criticize us for it, but we've thought, and we've talked, and we've discussed, and we feel that there is a way at this point to begin to allow some limited attendance at our center again. Now, we may be wrong, and it may come back to blow up in our faces, but we've discussed and we believe that the benefits are worth the risk. And so it doesn't mean we're opening up fully. First of all, I think we can only opt for Canadians anyway. So we're allowing a limited number. So second of all is that it's a limited number of Canadian meditators to come and practice. And our number is 2. We're going to allow 2 people at a time to start. And we'll be contacting those people who have already signed up, and we're going to be a little selective of who we choose. But it will be 2. And the second thing is that, and so you can potentially start to sign up for intensive courses at our center. The second thing is, so that link there is only for the at-home course. If you want to sign up for the intensive course, you have to go to our main website, sirimangalo.org. The second thing is that we're looking for a steward, someone to help support the practice at our center. And that would have to be someone who's already done at least a foundation course at our center, preferably also an advanced course, which would be like a month of total. Having done that at our center, if you're interested in being a steward, or if you want to come and do that first and then continue on as a steward, mainly involves cooking and shopping. There's some cleaning you could do, but we really expect all meditators to do their own cleaning and to help with cleaning the house. So that's not a big issue for the steward. Most is just to do cooking for the meditators and shopping for food. You'd have to do a little bit of financing with the board of directors. But if anyone's interested in doing that, coming to stay here, please contact the organization as well. You can join our Discord, which the link should be on the website. Discord is a chat server that allows us to set up chat channels where people can talk about different topics, and we can organize volunteers and so on. It's actually for gamers, it's supposed to be, but we're using it, and a lot of people do use it for other things. So we're using it for our organization. It's a really good organizational tool. But that's all for today then. Thank you all, and sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but may very well be that this will happen again. The next scheduled time is Wednesday at 8 p.m. our time, Eastern daylight savings time. Sadhu. Wish you all peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Thank you.